joy to be here with all of you and to everyone who's watching from afar. My name is Robin Greenfield, and I'm grateful to the city of Takoma Park for bringing me here. I'm on a month-long Earth Provides Us with Everything We Need tour as I'm embarked on a year of foraging all of my food and medicine, down to the salt, the oil, the spices. I'm eating only the food that I harvest from the land and the water. And so the timing just worked out really wonderfully to be able to come here to the city of Takoma Park. And tonight I'm going to share about my year of foraging, but I'm also going to be sharing a lot about the concept of waste and how we can live in a way that doesn't trash the only home that we have, planet Earth, as well as the city of Takoma Park and all the communities that we're involved with. And interestingly enough, a lot of people, when they think of foraging, they don't think of zero waste. But all of this food came from the earth with no packaging, no fossil fuels were shipped around the world. There was no pesticides or fungicides or any of that sort of thing. So foraging is actually, for me, a deep practice of zero waste that you might not think of. But I'm going to start off by sharing my journey in general of my attempt to live in harmony with Earth and the projects, the life that I've been living over the last 10 years or so, and then bring it back to this current endeavor that I am immersed in right now. So in 2011, I was living a fairly typical U.S. American lifestyle. I was very focused on material possessions and financial wealth. At the age of 25, I had the goal of being a millionaire by the time I was 30, and I was on track to do that. I was running a marketing company, and we were doing well. And I had a lot of friends, I had romance, I was exploring the world traveling was a big passion of mine. I was really living my dream. I was happy, I was healthy, and life was good. And then something happened, and I realized that I wanted to totally transform my life. And what that was is I started to watch some documentaries, and I started to read some books, and I realized that the way that I was living was causing such incredible destruction to the earth. And I was a part of such levels of exploitation and oppression of people, of the plants and animals, and of our earth as a whole, the ecosystems in which we depend upon. And I learned that, down to the basics, the food that I was eating, the car that I was driving, the gas I was pumping into the car, the stuff I was buying, the trash I was creating, the money I was spending, the investments that I had, it was all tied to systems of destruction. So at the age of 25, I realized that I was living a great hypocrisy, because my intention was never to live in a way that was causing harm and destruction, but now I knew that was the case. And so at that point, I could have felt really a lot of doom and gloom to realize, oh wow, my life isn't what I thought it is, and I'm not living the life that I thought. It's a system of so much, ultimately, a lot of it is lies that are being sold to us by these corporations, selling us these things and saying, everything is fine, when indeed it turned out that, everything is not so fine after all. So I could have felt a lot of doom and gloom, I could have felt hopeless and helpless, but I actually, when I learned this, felt, hello. When I learned this, I felt actually quite empowered. And the reason why is these documentaries and these books that told me the problems, they also shared with me solutions, that another way is possible, that there are ways that we can live that are in harmony with the earth. So I had realized that I was living in this web of consumerism, and with every action that I was taking, I was wrapped up in this web. Literally hundreds of different things I was doing. I was putting together all these pieces and realizing, wow, I am so deeply wrapped in this web of consumerism. Which another way of putting that is that I at the time would have called that the American dream. Now I know that the American dream is the world's nightmare. And so what I decided to do was to take my life back. One step at a time, I was going to unravel that web of consumerism, and I was going to weave a new web, a web of living in harmony with the earth. At the time, I would have said the word sustainability. That's still very much a word that I use today, but living in harmony with the earth. You could say equity, you could say justice, you could say reciprocity, you could say regeneration. But you could also just say not destroying the only home that we have. That's what I was very passionate about. So one of my early awakenings was actually watching The Story of Stuff by Annie Leonard. How many of you have seen that short video series? Okay, it's a really 15-minute video that basically taught me how much waste is created in all of my actions. So, I started to see, wow, look at how much trash is filling up in my garbage can. So it was like, okay, what could I do to not create that waste? That was a big start for me because it's very visual. We can see that. And so at the beginning of my journey, that was a big part of it. So that included small actions like switching to a reusable water bottle rather than disposable plastic bottles, or getting rid of the paper towels and having reusable washcloths. It included composting. That was a big one. I was putting all of my food scraps and everything into the garbage, and so instead starting to compost. I realized, most of my food was coming in plastic packaging, and so that meant starting to go to the local farmers market more and go to the big box stores less. And then, I was looking at the number of ways that I was wasting water. I learned that the average person in the United States uses about 80 to 100 gallons of water per day. And so I started to harvest rainwater, and I started to make a gray water system where my sink would then water food. So I could actually grow food with the wastewater rather than sending it to the sewer. So many small changes. I started to grow a little bit of my own food. I started to forage a little bit. I started to look at all the ways that I was spending money and the companies that I was supporting. And so I started to support local businesses rather than shipping my money out to, multinational corporations. I looked at the way that I was using energy and started to, see how I could use the energy of the sun, the energy of the human body. So bicycling was a wonderful thing that I started to do, is just how can I move my body in a way that's not burning fossil fuels? I started to look at where my money was. So every time I swiped my credit card, I was helping these big banks to profit that were invested in huge infrastructure projects that caused an incredible amount of waste and destruction. So taking my money out of the big banks. My investments were in fossil fuels and cigarettes and things like that through my mutual funds. So taking my money out of the mutual funds, my IRAs, and actually going the step of saying, well, I'm not even sure that we have a future. We don't know what our future is, but I know we have the present moment now, and I know that fresh water and clean air is valuable now and will always be valuable, and we have no future without those things. So much more started to just invest in the present moment strategically in a way that's beneficial to the future as well. So I was making many of these small changes to live more sustainably, but also a lot of really big changes. After about a year and a half, I got rid of my car, which a lot of what I was working on as well was the societal norms and the societal stigmas around these things. It's one thing to just not have a car and, get around, but where I grew up in northern Wisconsin, if you were an adult and you were riding a bicycle and you were wearing plain street clothes, not like your biking spandex, most people would assume there's one reason why you're riding a bike, and it's because you got a DUI, driving under the influence, and you're not allowed to drive. So these were the social stigmas that I was up against, and of just breaking free from these systems of waste. And so step by step, I was making these positive changes. And what I had done is I made a list of changes that I wanted to make, and I hung it up in my kitchen where I could check off one positive change per week, with the idea of making 100 positive changes in 2 years. So by doing that, it took me about 1.5 years or so. I had made over 100 changes in my life. My objective was to be the change that I wish to see in the world through my daily actions and all the ways that I interact with the world. And so after about 2 years or so, 1.5 years, I started to feel like, yeah, to some degree I am the change that I wish to see, that hypocrisy I was talking about. Well, I had gone from maybe a level 10 hypocrite down to maybe a level 5 hypocrite. I still had a lot of hypocrisy. It's impossible to care about the earth and care about humanity and not live in some hypocrisy. Except for if you go live alone in the woods all by yourself, but I don't even have the skills for that. None of us have the skills to be able to do that, nor would we then be able to positively impact society necessarily. So in 2013, that's when I set out on my environmental activism. And the idea from the beginning was I wanted to be the change that I wished to see, but I also wanted to show people that another way was possible. The things that I was learning from these documentaries and books, I wanted to share them with others who didn't know about these, this other way of being. So my first trip was I set out from California on a bamboo bicycle to bike across the United States I ended in Vermont, and I came right through here in 2013. So the idea was to cross the country and try to have no negative environmental impact. The average person creates 4.5 pounds of trash per day. So I made a rule that I had to carry every piece of trash that I carried with me all the way to the finish line, 4,700 miles. So if I ate a candy bar in California, that plastic wrapper was coming all the way to Vermont with me. And so I set these really strict rules that forced me to practice sustainability to the deepest level that I could, while creating a really immersive project, campaign, show that would bring people in and get us to think about some of these things that we never think about. So I took it to the extreme level. One other rule was that I could only eat food that was either locally grown, organic, and unpackaged, or I could also dumpster dive, because when we eat food that's going to waste in the garbage, that's diverting waste from the landfill. There's no impact, so it was my no impact way of crossing the country. And that summer, about 70% of my diet ended up coming from grocery store dumpsters. For electricity, I couldn't use any electricity for the whole trip. So even to the level of if I wanted to cross the street, I couldn't push the button. Someone else would have to push that button and then I would go. Or if I wanted to walk into a store and it only had electric doors, I'd wait there until someone else walked in and then I'd hop in behind them. And so the idea of this was that I was analyzing every single action that I took to learn the truth of my actions and rewire the way that I was being. So that was my first trip in 2013. And then in 2014, I cycled across the country again, and that's when I started the campaign, The Food Waste Fiasco, where I would dive into grocery store dumpsters, take out the perfectly good food to create a visual display of just how much of our food is being wasted. So in the United States, about $165 billion worth of food goes to waste per year, while 1 in 7 U.S. Americans are food insecure. And so that was the idea, that was to create a visual that would help people to see the I was just showing the tip of the iceberg, but in a way that helped people to see the iceberg of food waste that exists behind closed doors, in the dumpsters, at the farms, in the facilities, etc. In 2016, I embarked on a project that, instead of being the change that I wish to see, I instead decided to immerse in that lifestyle that I had left behind 5 years ago. And for 1 month, I lived like the average person, eating, shopping, consuming, just like the average person does, but with one big exception, and that was that I had to wear every piece of trash that I created. So if I lived like the average person, I'd be wearing 135 pounds of trash at the end of the month. So I had a specially designed suit that was made. This was in New York City and Manhattan, and it had clear pockets so that I could distribute the trash all throughout. And by the end of the month, I was wearing 87 pounds of trash. So I was a walking billboard for the truth behind our consumerism. And everywhere I went throughout New York City, people would see me, and so often they'd say, "What are you doing?" And I would say, "Oh, okay, I'm just living like the average person, but I have to wear all of my garbage." And they would look at me and they would say, "Oh, that's me." And so my form of activism is not about good or bad or right or wrong. It's just about showing something, showing a reality. Many people think that there's an away, that when we create garbage, we throw it away. But so many of us now know there's no such thing as away. It used to be that the world seemed like this, to a lot of people, sort of infinite place. Now, you can swipe a credit card and you can fly around the world in 48 hours. Anybody without any real skills can travel around the entire globe in 48 hours while watching TV and gaining weight. That's how small of a world we have. And so there is no way. And the more and more that we look into this, we realize that everything is connected. When we spray pesticides onto our lawn, that goes somewhere. When we throw trash away, that goes somewhere. Another form of waste that I got really passionate about was actually our poop and our pee. Where does that really go? 8 billion human beings pooping and peeing every day. That's a lot. So I looked into the flush toilet system, and, well, how it basically works is it goes down to the toilet, it goes to a treatment facility, and then through a process, they're able to shrink it down to about 10% of the volume. Sometimes that's actually spread onto our farm fields. Sometimes it's incinerated. Sometimes it's, I think goes to the landfill. I haven't refreshed myself on that in a little while. But most of the time, it's a complete waste product. It's a burden that has to be dealt with that we spend probably billions of dollars annually worldwide to deal with. Big, big problem. While we're doing that, I remember I was in Sebastian, Florida, and I picked up the newspaper, and on the front page it said, 3 million gallons of raw sewage spilled into the river. I don't remember the name of the river. And I was like, wow. And it said, 4th largest spill in a couple of years. And so it turns out these systems are nowhere near as effective as we would like to hope. So I started to get really passionate about the concept of humanure, which is the words human and manure combined. So there's a book called the Humanure Handbook by Joseph Jenkins, which teaches all about this. It's a deep dive on the concept of waste, especially in this realm, but it really is questioning just that whole concept. And so I started composting my own poop. And so that was 5 years after my journey began. And that was both a campaign and just a personal living. It was very important to me that I wasn't flushing my problem, flushing this resource and making it somebody else's problem. And so it turns out that it's a problem, but at the same time, it's the solution. We can safely and sustainably compost human poop and pee. and turn it into a very rich soil, compost, and actually grow food with it in a safe way. And when we do that, we don't need to do all the extraction of these fertilizers, nitrogen and potassium, that we're literally mining from the earth. So that was another, a big step forward, and it's still a little like, talking about composting my poop up in front of a group of people. There's still some self-consciousness about this. And that was, I found, the most important step forward through all of this. Was I started to look at all the actions I was taking, and instead of asking the question of how will people perceive me, I started to always ask the question of, is this beneficial to the earth, my community, and myself? That was the central question that I started to ask with every action that I was taking. In 2016, another project that I immersed in was I landed in Mexico the first time in Baja, and then the second time in Panama with no money, with just the clothes on my back, and had to travel home on the kindness of others. And the reason why is when you turn on the news in a lot of places, they'll tell you that the world is full of bad people, dangerous people. And my belief is that the reality is that most people care about one another. So after the second time, 37 days of traveling through Central America and Mexico, when I got back to my home, which was San Diego at the time, the only words that I could mutter out of my mouth were just, people are good. That is the only thing that I could feel after 37 days of traveling. And I will, of course, acknowledge my privilege in that regard, for me being a white man, but also holding a U.S. passport, very different from somebody who's a refugee or somebody who doesn't have physical abilities, or somebody who is of a demographic where there's racism towards them. So many privileges that I have that are important to acknowledge, but still, that's what I felt, just people are good. In 2020, my project was for 1 year. I grew and foraged all of my food. So the idea was to see, could I step outside of the global industrial food system completely? That is where there's so much waste and destruction. And so that was my deep immersion. Do you have a question? Oh, okay. There'll be questions at the end. Yes. So that was a year of growing and foraging every bite of my food and medicine, and that was a deep practice of sustainability and a deep practice of connection with Earth. And then after that project, I simplified my life down to having just 44 possessions. And so a deep practice is also just on simple living. Mahatma Gandhi has been he was one of my earliest influences and inspiration, and remains today. And one of the sayings that he has really deeply imparted upon me is, live simply so others may simply live. And that is as relevant today as it was then in India. And the basic concept there is that when our lives are a web of consumerism tied to systems of destruction, every action we're taking is often taking away life or decreasing quality of life. And when we live simply and we say, well, do I really need this? Would this actually enrich my life? So often the answer is actually no. And so as we start to live more simply, so many of these things that I thought that I needed, so many of these things that I thought were necessary, they started to just fall away. So simple living is another thing that when people think of zero waste, they might not think of simple living first and foremost, but the less we need, the easier it is to meet those needs, and then the less waste there is created in general. And at this point, I also want to mention this concept of waste. Waste is well, it's a new thing. It didn't exist on Earth for like 99.999% of the existence of this planet. So waste in permaculture, we say waste is just a resource out of place. Nature has no such thing as waste. It's all closed loop cycles that recycle the nutrients and continue producing and continue transforming and manifesting as something else. So we like to say waste is just a resource out of place. So my current endeavor right now, I started 13 days ago, is right now I am foraging all of my food for a year. So that in 2019 was a year of growing and foraging all my food. So my gardens and the food that I was harvesting from, you could say, the wild or nature, which again, these are just words. But so this year, I'm doing a year where I'm harvesting all of my food that's growing freely and abundantly from the land. So this is a little display of the foods that I'm eating from, well, okay. We talked about societal norms and stigmas a little bit. This is one, this here is venison from a deer that was hit by a car. Some people call that roadkill. I call it a deer that was hit by a car because it was a deer while it was walking before it died, and it's a deer afterwards, still first and foremost. If I'm ever hit by a car, please don't call me Roadkill Robin. You could just, a human that was hit by a car. Oh, you can't see from over there?
Oh, yeah. Which is the venison again?
Right here, and you'll have a chance to come up here afterwards and see everything. So there's this jar is actually empty because I haven't caught any fish yet, and that represents the fish that I haven't caught, which will be a part of my diet. There's pear sauce and applesauce. This is the wild rice. Stinging nettle powder. Here is king bolete and maitake mushrooms, chanterelles. This is a medicinal mushroom tea with maitake, reishi, turkey tail, chaga, and lion's mane. Apple cider vinegar made from apples from a wild apple tree in my homeland of northern Wisconsin. Wild fermentation is a big part of my life. So these are lacto-fermented ramp bulbs here in salt water, which I'll get to. Here is hazelnuts harvested. We have millions of wild hazelnut trees that are out there for us to harvest the abundance. This is green powder, so I harvest greens, like all the different wild greens, dehydrate them, blend them into a powder, and then that's a super vitamin mix right here. Many of you probably go to the grocery store and you buy your green powder. Well, you can make that from the abundance of greens that are growing right in our front yards, backyards, church yards, school yards, medians of our sidewalks, the city hall, all over. This is a spice mix for making my tasty foods. I've got my teas. This is my herbal tea mix for the mornings and my herbal tea mix for the evenings. And then there's different fruits here like pear sauce, plum sauce, canned blueberries, high bush cranberry. So this isn't high bush cranberry. This is autumn berry or autumn olive. Now this is a plant that is called invasive. And so, how many of you have heard that term invasive? So I like to use a little different of a term, and that is a plant that has been introduced to an area and it comes from another area, and it's so prolific and abundant that it is causing ecosystem harm, including displacing the native plants of the area. That's an accurate description. When we label a plant as just invasive, we other it. We say that it's inherently bad. And that's not too much different from calling humans illegal. I think most of us here wouldn't want a human to be considered an other or an outsider, and when we use that term invasive, we kind of have the tendency to be doing the same thing. So when it comes to foraging, a lot of people will say, you shouldn't forage because you're taking from the animals, the limited resources they have. But harvesting plants that are considered invasive is actually, every single bite is an ecosystem service. So this is a plant that you can harvest to your heart's content. There's way, way more than the birds and the squirrels and any of the critters will ever eat. And by doing so, with every bite you take, you're actually doing an ecosystem service. So, much to a lot of people's belief, I don't believe that humans are a cancer upon this earth. I believe that we can actually exist in a way that is beneficial to the earth. That's what people have been doing since time immemorial. Some people think that it can't be done today, but for me this is a deep experience, a deep practice that we can still live in harmony with the earth, that the earth can provide us with everything that we need. So a few other things that are here. This is a fruit leather made from choke cherry. We have some of my very important medicine is elderberry. So for this entire year, all of my medicine that I'm taking as well is just plants. And some people think, well, that certainly can't work without pharmaceuticals. But you have to remember that most pharmaceuticals are actually modeled off of something that comes from plants in the first place. There's my salt. So I harvested my salt from the ocean, and so that's as simple as harvesting salt from the clean salt water from the cleanest body of water, the cleanest area of ocean, and then you can just let that evaporate.
You have rock salt too?
I don't know exactly what rock salt is. So you could call this rock salt. It looks a little rocky. So yeah, you can just let it evaporate in trays in the sun, and then you have salt. Or if you're in a little bit more of a hurry like I was on this tour, I just boiled it. So you can do that as well. And then there's seaweed down here, and then there's some other unique things. Oh, this is sweet fern tea. This is fireweed tea. This is mint, wild mint. And then an interesting one here, this is evening primrose seeds. Do any of you know the plant evening primrose? So you can harvest the seeds of that, and this is actually one of the highest plants in omegas that there are. So a lot of these plants are highly nutritious and very delicious. Over here I have a few of the different mushrooms that I make tea from. Actually, not this one. This is this you can actually draw in, and I'm meaning to write on there Robin's foraging year, but life is busy, so I haven't gotten around to that yet. So it's one of the tasks. So yeah, right now, this immersion is a really deep practice. It's a deep practice in my belief that the earth can provide us with everything that we need, and that we can exist in a way on this earth that actually is beneficial. So there's so much that I could say, but I'd really like to open it up to questions and hear anything that's alive in you, anything that you're curious about. Before I do that, though, I'd like to say, some people still, it's like you hear all this and it's like, okay, with the state of the world, why even try? Like, things are, for some people, it's like so bad. Like, can we really make a difference that is worth it? And my answer is, I don't know what's going to happen to humanity. I don't know what the next 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years holds. But for me, it's that I really value life. I believe that the life of each of us here matters. I believe the life of all the plants and animals we share this home with matters. And so if we can exist in a way where in our actions we show that value for all the life that we share this home with, then that's worth it, no matter what happens. And we don't, for many of us, it's so overwhelming to feel this weight of the world on our shoulders. And so what I would encourage is, none of us were born with the responsibility of saving the world. But everyone in this room, all of us have a fair bit of privilege, and we have the option to take responsibility for our own lives. We have the option of bringing our actions into alignment with our beliefs. So my encouragement would be, rather than focusing on the overwhelm, is think about what are you excited about? What changes are you excited about to make in your life? Are you excited to start looking into your trash can and seeing how you can do things differently to create less waste? Are you excited to start composting? Are you excited to maybe start growing some food or foraging? Are you excited to volunteer in your community or at your schools? What is it that you feel really enlivened by? And my encouragement is to start there. Don't start with the things that are like daunting, that you don't know if you can do. And so one step at a time, transform your life into the life that you really want to be living. Build the foundation of a more sustainable, harmonious life. And step by step, as you build that foundation, the things that you might have thought were never possible often start to just kind of flow into your being. These little things are all connected. We live in this deep state of interconnection. And as we start to make one change and another change, well, we start to hang out with some new people. We start to look at the world differently. So my encouragement would be one step at a time. One small change, sometimes big change. Continue doing that until you become the change that you wish to see in the world, and then keep on going from there. So I love you all very much. I'm very grateful to be here with all of you, and I'm really interested to hear what questions that you might have or what comments you might have. Over here?
Okay. Yeah, if you don't mind. We're going to use a microphone to help the recording.
Interesting talk. In your foraging year, if someone gave you a sandwich or invited you over for dinner, would you eat that?
So for this year of foraging all my food, I have to be foraging and actively involved. So if someone invites me over to dinner, well, they have to invite me over for some foraging first, and then we can make dinner together, or I'll bring all of my foraged food and we'll have dinner together. So for this year of foraging, one of my biggest challenges is, for so many people, they like to share, they like to contribute, and so one of my challenges is the practice of compassionate communication, of making sure that they still are able to feel involved and connected and contribute without being able to actually feed me. And that is a challenging aspect of it. But yes, so literally every bite that I take, I have to forage or be together, and we're foraging it together, down to actually even the water. So this water is spring water, and I fill up my spring water as well. So yes, you are welcome to invite me over for dinner, but you'll be eating something a little different than you're used to.
Thanks so much. Very inspirational. You initially started out your talk saying that you were living a healthy, happy life, an average American life, and you went through this transformation. How that healthy and happy definition of healthy and happy at the time, and how it feels right now in terms of both your physical and spiritual health. Like, how would you compare it? And also, the people around you, how do they change, or do they stay the same, or how do they adjust to your change?
Well, I think for me, at the core of health is meaning and purpose. I think if we have no meaning or purpose, it's very, very challenging to have quality mental health or physical health. So the source of my health is that I have a deep level of meaning and purpose that keeps me going consistently. Also, living with my actions in alignment with my beliefs. What I've found is that I would say that I end up in more of a flow state. So it was Gandhi who said, when our actions, our words, and our thoughts are all in alignment, that's harmony. And so for me, as I've continued down this journey, yes, it's about the food that I'm putting in my body and the medicines that I'm taking in, and exercise and all of that for health and happiness. But I would say the center of my health and happiness comes around relationships It's about my relationships with the earth, my relationship with the plants and animals, and also my relationship with myself is deeply important. So I would say that my health is in a similar realm as before, but my happiness is much more consistent. My goal is a baseline level of contentness and joy. And a lot of that comes through, some of the people who have been most influential for me are Buddhist. So Thich Nhat Hanh is a big teacher of mine. And so it's less the pursuit of ecstasy and bliss and more of the pursuit of a balanced contentness and joy. And as far as this, experience with the plants, I have found that, as I start to now, everywhere I go, I'm surrounded by my friends. The mulberry is a friend. The basswood is a friend. Every onion springing up from the ground is a friend. The mint is a friend. All of these I feel that friendship with. And so on my last adventure, last year I walked from Canada to LA, I started to explore what if the sky was my best friend? And that's one of the things that I'm working on right now, and it does bring a lot of joy and happiness. So hopefully that gives some insight into that question. And the second part was... relationships. Well, relationships for me are at the core of everything. So when we live this consumer-driven way that's based on just buying everything we need, all the products and all the services, we sever relationships from our life. And so as I've chosen to live simply, as I've chosen to live more sustainably, it's all based on relationships. My entire existence is based on relationships. The challenging part about that is that I am a fairly independent person that likes to do things my way, which is a product of that's a product of being a part of this country, the United States. That's what was ingrained into me. So for me, the true solutions to most of our problems lie in community. So the less stuff that I have, the more I am actually dependent upon others. And that's my intention. I want to be dependent on you. I want to be dependent on all of you. I want us to actually need one another. Because from what I've seen, true community thrives when we actually need each other. And so so some of my relationships have struggled, definitely I've struggled with my dad, for example. Whereas with my mom, our relationship has improved and we've grown much closer. One of my main practices to help with relationships, because as an environmental activist, one of the common things to do is judge people and tell people that they're bad and that they're destroying the world. And I may have had some of that for the first handful of years until I realized it makes me miserable and everybody else around me miserable. This book, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, I got into this practice about 3 years ago now. And this is a practice of basically listening always for people's feelings and needs. No matter what anybody ever does, what I do to the best of my ability is I listen. What are they feeling and what are they needing? And when you're not doing that, you're not judging. You're just listening for feelings and needs, or my own feelings and needs. What am I feeling and needing right now? So I couldn't talk about relationships without talking about this. This has been a core practice in my life. And I could say another 1 hour about that, but I'll summarize that there.
Yes, hi, thanks. I'd really love to hear your strategy about sort of foraging and preserving, and I see that you have planned some travels to maybe be in areas where there will be food to forage fresh at certain times of year. But I hear you describe preserving and dehydrating and other methods as part of your storehouse.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about all of that, and also how much you're traveling with versus planning for example, are you collecting persimmons while you're in the mid-Atlantic and
if you
other
can show
things
me
that
a
are
persimmon
here?
tree, I will.
There are plenty
Are they
around
ripe right
here.
now?
Yes, they are.
Ooh,
They are.
okay, let's talk afterwards.
Okay.
Direct me to some places. I'm free tomorrow.
For example, yes.
Wonderful. So yes, I am based in northern Wisconsin in my homeland. That's where I am based out of. I live in a little shelter of sorts. Don't know how to describe it exactly. And so I spent 3 months preparing from July 1st until I began on October 9th. And so I was doing a lot of storing. So there's dehydrating, there's canning, I have a freezer, so freezing, and then there's just room temperature storage or cold storage for things. So storing foods in many different ways. And a lot of people, this is one of the most common misperceptions, is they think, oh, he's just harvesting his food every day and eating whatever he finds that day. And I take some responsibility for that because in some videos I've done goofy things like eat leaves directly from the ground, just playing around, and so people have this idea that that's what I'm doing. I'm grazing like a giraffe. But the reality is that any forager knows that how this works is you find an abundance and you harvest that abundance and you store it. That's what you need to do to be effective and efficient. If my entire life was just about harvesting and eating, maybe I could do that. But obviously here we are. I have other things that I'm doing besides just foraging my food. So I need to be effective and efficient. And that means finding the abundance. So to do this tour, I'm on the road for a month. I brought enough food where I don't have to harvest while I'm on the road. But I also left out enough food that would force me to have to harvest in order to really thoroughly enjoy my food and to get the fully complete diet. And so I'm foraging a lot on the road, and I'm preserving a lot of that. So I have gotten a year's supply of seaweed and a 4-month supply of salt. Over the last couple days, I harvested 25 pounds of acorns, of probably about 50 pounds of hickory nuts, some pecans, and bitter nut hickories to make my hickory nut oil. Today I harvested probably a couple months supply of stinging nettle. So even as I'm on the road doing this, I'm harvesting and processing this food, and we have Brad over here is my teammate, and he's driving, and the vehicle is quite filling up, especially over the last few days. And then lastly, I'll say that after this, I'll be back in Wisconsin for a couple months. I'm going to do 2 months in Florida in the winter, teaching and sharing, and I'm actually going to be hosting a weekend-long foraging school there. So if anybody is already getting away to Florida for the winter and wants a deep immersion in foraging, that's a possibility. And then I will also be doing a trip up the western coast next summer, and then I'll be back here next fall. So I'm probably traveling for 6 months of the 12 months. So that is a whole nother realm. That requires a lot of planning, and in some ways a lot more work. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of a summary. Some foods, when I harvest them, I try to harvest a year's supply, and others I say, okay, I know I'll be able to harvest this again in this time and that time frame, so it varies. But I have quite a bit of food stored away. I could probably right now just sit on a couch for at least a month without running out of anything at this point. Right here?
Thank you, by the way. So I was wondering, how were you able to continue your practices during the social distancing of COVID-19? And also, do you make your own clothes? Is that part of your sustainability efforts, I guess?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I was actually locked down in France during COVID-19. I was on a world speaking tour that had just started weeks prior, and somebody picked me up at the train station in Toulouse. Oh, okay. He picked me up at the train station. We had never actually met before, and we got home, and President or whatever Macron came on the TV and said, "Lockdown begins. So I ended up in their house for 6 weeks. I basically was their foreign exchange student, eating cheese and, enjoying the French life for a while. So, but yeah, I foraged. I deepened my foraging knowledge, and then over time, it's a long stretch of a couple years of different phases. But I definitely didn't let up on my living sustainably, and I personally still manage to have a lot of connections with other people, and still I feel like I managed quite well to hold to what I was accomplishing in my life at that time. Now, as far as my clothes go, yes. So last year I got to the point where I got rid of all industrial clothes, and now I'm wearing 100% homemade, natural fiber, and naturally dyed clothing. So this is all wool, all from sheep here in the United States. These pants are dyed with black walnut. So black walnut you can use the husks of black walnut to make different colored browns. This is actually glossy buckthorn. So you can make green with buckthorn, which is also considered an invasive species. And so that's what this is. And then this is just the natural color of the sheep that the wool came from. So that's been, I mentioned that step by step. And that took 10 years. That took over 10 years to get to the point of stepping outside of that clothing industry. Because, of course, I learned about microfibers and realized that when I was wearing these plastic clothes, every step that I was taking, I was literally shedding plastic out into the earth, which means into my body, into your body, into the body of the plants and the animals. And so breaking free from that, and then also just in natural dyed clothing, like those colors, or not naturally dyed, the dyed natural clothing like cotton, those colors are polluting the waterways in India and Bangladesh. And so when my clothes are fading, it's just returning plants rather than toxic dyes and such. So yeah, I love being in clothes that for example, if I lose this shirt in the woods, it just returns to the woods. It's no different from a bird shedding its wing or its feathers, or a deer dying and falling to the woods. The same goes here. And as far as one of my ultimate goals in life, it's just to return to the earth. And so in these clothes, I'm ready. I will not litter when I die when I'm in these clothes, whether I fall off a cliff or I go into the woods and I don't come back. I'll be able to simply return to the earth. So that's a deep level of that closed loop that I strive for. So thanks for asking that. Here?
I really enjoyed your presentation. I've also grappled a lot with how to live in a way that's aligned with my values, and also as sustainable as possible. And I think it's challenging, given that we're living in this society that's, it was formed on colonization or colonialism and capitalism and consumerism.
Yeah.
And it's like really hard to escape that when you're living here. And I think my ideal life might be, or lifestyle might be, like living on a self-sufficient commune and just making producing all of my own food and clothes and other things, other needs. But then, well, for one thing, I feel like I probably don't have the physical stamina to live on a commune. But also, like I also want to try to influence society. So I work in climate policy, so I kind of have to be a part of society.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, in your current life, how much are you kind of still kind of like tied into our economic system here, and how much are you kind of independent from it?
The economic system, yes. So, well, one thing that I want to make a note on that is I know I always feel a little self-conscious because I'm talking about myself a lot here, because my strategy is my life is my message, and so I'm embodying another way as possible. But It's really about what can each of us do, whether it's in climate policy. Maybe we're a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or a caretaker. Maybe we clean homes. Whatever we do, it's like, how can we use the skills we have? How can we use our life? That's what it's always about coming back to. It's about asking, what is it that we can do ourselves? So I wanted to acknowledge that. Also, the community aspect is one of the most important things. So if you are interested in living in community, one thing you can look into is intentional communities. So there's a website, ic.org, which stands for Intentional Communities, and then there's the Global Eco Village Network. So if you're interested in living in community in a more sustainable way, those are wonderful resources. If you go to robingreenfield.org/community, all of that information is there. And then, before I forget, I also want to mention my website is a plethora of resources. So if you want to reduce your waste, you can go to robingreenfield.org/waste. If you want to forage, go to robingreenfield.org/forage. If you want to grow food, it's /food. If you want to learn about the financial system and how to break free from that, it's /money. So my website is a deep rabbit hole. So beware, you might end up there for quite a few hours, but it directs you to all of these other resources. So as far as the monetary system, when I first started to change my life in 2011, the learning about the reality of our monetary system was at the core of my desire to change my life, because I realized that the way our monetary system is set up, it is, with most every dollar I spent, it is intrinsically tied to what I don't want to be doing with my life. So in 2015, I made a lifetime vow to earn below the federal poverty threshold, which at the time was about $11,000. So since 2015, I've earned less than $11,000 per year, and I'll earn less than the federal poverty threshold for as long as I live. I've also made a commitment that 100% of my media income is donated directly to nonprofits. So speaking is an example of that. So I use the resources, the skills I have to direct those funds. I'm not against money in of itself, but what I try to do is I direct funds to the solution that I want to see in the world. I've also committed for life to not paying federal taxes. Because when we pay federal taxes, we pay for the military-industrial complex, war, we pay for police brutality, we pay for the prison system, we pay for the bailing out of the big banks, we pay for the subsidization of fossil fuels. So I've made a lifetime commitment to not pay for any of that by making my own tax system, and that is that I direct the money directly to organizations that are doing the work. And so I have worked to demonetize my life substantially. I live with very minimal money and actually don't have a bank account, credit card, debit card, Venmo, PayPal, anything. I just have cash. So the key, of course, is relationships and skills. Those are my life savings. Some people would be concerned. I have literally no life savings, and I've told numerous people that had me in their will to remove me from their will. So I have no life savings in that regard, but I have a deep level of life savings, and that is relationships. I think that the greatest life insurance that we can have is people who care about us. And I think that the way that I choose to do that is by caring myself. So my simple belief is that as long as I dedicate my entire life to being of service, that I'll have my basic needs taken care of. If I'm an old man, maybe that's a guest bedroom in someone's home who's happy to have me there, and I'll still have skills, whether it's storytelling, or maybe I'll still be able to garden. I'll probably be able to do some physical things, but if not, I could watch kids as in my older years. So I've designed my life in a deeply non-monetary way. One of my biggest inspirations there is Mark Boyle. He wrote the book The Moneyless Man and The Moneyless Manifesto, and those are some of the best resources that I know to learn how to demonetize your life. So yeah, that's some thoughts on that. Yeah, you're welcome. Right here in the front.
My question is that here in the US, if you break your leg, it will cost you a lot of money. Do you want to rely on other people, kindness, and what other people can do also for free? Because there is some doctors that will like fix your legs for free, but it costs thousands of dollars and it's not justified. So let's say you need an emergency surgery, you have to worry for all that money aspect because people will maybe give, but is it also fair that people give to sustain that accident of your life, you know? And that's why we pay taxes. That's why for me, as a French person, it's really important to pay my taxes. So...
Yes. Now, of course, if our tax system was fundamentally functioning, it would be a very different story. But as I shared, so I look at health a little bit different from my own individual health. So we have a system where we think of things in a very linear, transactional way. And the earth is much more complex than that. So, well, I do have a 45-minute video on health insurance, age, and death, where I really dive into all of that. But first of all, so we all have different values around our own individual life. But for me, I truly believe, I know, that I am not more important than any of the other 8 billion people that exist on this earth. So with that being the case, and I know I'm young and healthy at the time right now, so some people would say I'm just delusional, but I have chosen that under some circumstances, I would not choose to expend vast resources, both monetary and physical resources, to keep myself alive. And that's a deep practice of impermanence. I truly don't believe so much in my importance as we have been taught to in this society. So, and then there's other things, like for example, it's important to know, like for example, if you're in the woods and your finger gets chopped off, you cannot bleed out through your finger. It is not a life-threatening scenario. Knowing that's important, you know that you're not going to die. And I've actually learned how to deal with, if I had that, not necessarily even have to go to the hospital, if I did lose a finger. There's lots of people who function without fingers, for example. So I have a different relationship around a lot of that, but there's still some circumstances where I could end up going to the hospital, and then one thing I can easily do is I can get the bill and then I can pay that off. It doesn't mean that I have to rely on taxpayer dollars. I can get a bill and I can still take responsibility for that if that were to happen. So I've done research into that, and for example, like if I broke my arm, the cost cash is about $5,000. I could manage that. So those are a few notes on that. But I also want to again say, this is my unique life. This is not me telling anybody else not to have health insurance or things like that. And again, I have a lot of privileges that allow me to live this life. But also, you mentioned the idea of would I want to rely on the help of others? And that goes back to what I said before. And the answer is absolutely. So I have not monetized my life. So for example, these books that I have here, this book I could easily sell and keep all of that money. That would be something that would be a pretty normal thing to do. But instead, this book is not for sale. It's an experiment in the gift economy, and 100% of the money goes to Black and Indigenous-led food sovereignty initiatives. So if there's a time in my life where I've spent decades giving, and then somebody decides they want to help me, I'll receive that help, and I'll receive it with gratitude, because there's plenty of people with abundance that are happy to share that abundance. So we'll see what happens in my lifetime, but it's also quite possible that that never happens, that I never have a major medical accident that I decide to go to the hospital for. So time will tell with some of those things. Does that give some insight into that question? Nice, thanks.
So many questions, but I guess two at this point I'll ask, and perhaps there might be time at the end. I don't want to deprive others. But one is, if not everybody can live your life. You've mentioned that a number of times. So if you had to identify, the top 3 things, 5 things, 2 things, whatever, in descending order of importance, what could those be for, quote unquote, ordinary folks?
Yes. I'll answer that first.
Please.
So, for those of you looking to make changes in your life, if you go to robingreenfield.org/100, that is actually the list of the first 100 changes that I made. And with many of those, you can click on that change and it takes you to resources and knowledge about that change. So for example, if you want to live low waste, you have all the resources that you want there. So some of my top recommendations are to compost. So no food or no animal, no plant goes into the garbage. It always goes back to the earth. To use our bodies to get around when we can. So walking, biking, minimizing the amount of time we're in these individual giant vehicles, and instead public transportation versus, the individual fossil fuel or electric vehicle. Food. Sourcing our food locally as much as possible. So from local farmers, gardeners, the farmers market. That is a really big one. Embracing a local food economy. So I would say growing a little bit of our own food, even if it's just some tomatoes on our balcony and some basil. Just being involved in that process is really transformational. Another one would be just to learn a few of the foods and medicines that are growing freely and abundantly all around us. And I'm actually giving a talk in Bowie, I guess it's pronounced, Bowie, in 2 nights at a place called Forested, where we'll be doing a little bit of a plant walk. So if you're interested in learning some of those plants. And also I'll be down in Richmond, Virginia, so if you're looking for something to do this weekend, I'll be at a food forest there, so you can learn about that.
On your site?
Yes,
Okay,
robingreenfield.org/foraging year is my schedule for all of this. So also, I'll be in Frederick, I just came from, but then besides Richmond, United Plant Savers, Cincinnati, Columbus, Indianapolis, Chicago, and then back to my homeland. So if you have friends in any of those places you want to you can let them know to come out. So those would be some of my top changes. And then, a couple of the other ones would be, if we wanted to look at some of the really big ones, it would be removing our money from the big banks and switching to a local credit union, divesting from any destructive investments and putting that into investments that actually invest in the future that we want on this earth. Flying. When it comes to flying, that's the single most impactful action that most of us take as far as the carbon footprint, the destruction. So really only flying if it's really quite meaningful, if we really need to. Some people, go vegan because of the carbon footprint for that, but then they continue flying a lot. But it's like one flight across the country is the equivalent of 350 industrial factory farmed hamburgers. So a flight is a really big deal. So looking at our flying habits would be that would be another one of the really big ones. So those would be some of the bigger ones as well. It's hard to pick just 3, but those are some of them. This mic just not working. Okay. Nice. Fortunately, you can still hear me. So yeah, any other questions? Right here.
This is a bit of a less serious question. 2 questions actually, but where do you get your spring water from? And what is your favorite meal?
So where did I get my spring water? So you can go to a website, findaspring.com. And it is a database of all the springs where you can go and harvest your spring water freely and abundantly from the earth. So findaspring.com. My last spring was up by Frederick, and then before that it was Connecticut, and then before that it was my homeland. I actually am from the land that has some of the purest waters on earth. I've been drinking out of an artesian well when I'm back there for 39 years now. So that's where I get my water from, mostly from wells, from springs. And then my favorite food or my favorite meal, well, definitely it'll often involve wild rice or monomen. This is definitely one of the plants that has influenced me the most, and I would like to acknowledge the Anishinaabe people. They are the people of the land where I'm from who've had a relationship with this plant for over 700 years, potentially much longer, and have been stewards of this plant for a very, very long time. So when I'm eating this food, I am connected to a human-plant relationship that has not been severed for over 700 years. And when I eat this food, I feel a connection to that relationship, which is quite powerful. It's not just the nutrients that it provides, but it's that relationship with the earth. So right now, my staple meal is venison, wild rice, venison, sea salt, some different herbs like monarda and wild onion. I'll often add in a handful of berries like aronia or autumn olive, fresh. Those actually add an interesting flavor dynamic to just add some fresh berries in at the end. And, of course, mushrooms, maitake or chanterelle in that meal. So I like to make a one-pot meal where everything I need is kind of in one pot. So that would be, one of my favorites. Yeah. What time is it now? How long have we been going?
It is 8:17.
This actually technically ends at 8:30. So let's just do one more question for now. Right here?
Hold on. If you don't mind.
My question is that if eventually enough people stop using car companies, plane companies, do you think the car or plane companies or meat companies are going to go bankrupt and have to shut down and then they won't be polluting anymore?
Well, okay.
What an easy question.
I'll give two parts to that. So it was if. I mean, if all of us as human beings decided that we were going to do things in a different way, then we would have new systems. Some people say to me like, well, if everybody wanted to do what you were doing, then who would do this? And I'm like, the message isn't for everybody to do what I'm doing. The message is let's each individually use our lives to the best ability we can to be of service to this earth, to be of service to the plants and animals. And then the other part is, okay, if everybody, say, wanted to forage all their food, then people would say, well, the earth would be decimated. Well, but you have to think a little bit bigger. If everybody wanted to do this, it would mean we had all questioned all of the societal structures. It would mean we were all critically thinking. It would mean that we were all developing relationships with everything around us. Everything is interconnected. So if everybody wanted to live this way, it would mean we'd be putting our resources into finding the best possible solutions for living in harmony on this earth. So none of this exists in a vacuum. As we start to change our minds, we start to see what is possible. So I am really, really grateful for tonight because, I was brought here first and foremost to talk about wastes. And my strategy, though, really is critical thinking. When we think critically, when we question everything, these systems of destruction and of waste, we start to see that another way is possible and we replace them. And that's really the goal. A note on that, so yeah, these systems would collapse. And that's what I want. I want to see these systems crumbling, But while these systems are crumbling, we're putting new systems into place that truly serve us, that truly serve the people, that truly serve the plants and animals. I have a desire to say that I don't think that's going to happen. I do think that we will destroy ourselves, and which some people might hear that and they might feel a little depressed about that. But I don't. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I think most likely humanity will probably destroy ourselves in the relatively near future. And that, 5,000 years is the relatively near future in the blink, in the existence of humanity. But I'm going to do my best to not sink the ship and to keep that, that ship afloat. And, again, that's meaningful to me to no matter what happens. I'm a realist, I'm logical, I'm rational, but still going to strive for the best that we possibly can. So I'm really grateful that you've had so many questions. I can see there's a lot of thinking going on, and that's my real objective. I don't have to have any answers anymore. In fact, I don't really want to have answers. I really want to create critical thought. That's my objective. So as far as closing out the evening, I would love to share, there's two things that I want to say. First of all, one of the main purposes of this tour was to talk about community fruit trees. So over the next decade, we're going to be planting 1 million community fruit and nut trees. And so if you're excited about the possibility, or if you're excited about planting fruit and nut trees in a very grassroots collaborative effort, you can go to robingreenfield.org/community fruit trees, and I am really looking for people that want to get involved. We're looking for people that want to fund that, to help us to be able to plant all of those trees, people who are going to grow trees, people who are going to plant trees, people who want to take a prominent role in that initiative. So I'm excited about that. I would have liked to have talked more about that tonight, but a lot of things to talk about. And then secondly, I would love to share this book with all of you. It's available on a donation basis, and your donation can be that you learn how to grow kale and you grow more kale and you give that kale to others, or you learn how to forage some things and you share that with others. If you have the finances to donate, we lovingly accept those donations. Again, the profits go to Black and Indigenous-led food sovereignty initiatives, and also allow us to be able to give this book for free to different libraries and organizations and sustainability initiatives. And take these books, put them into local libraries, school libraries, community libraries, give them as gifts to friends. I don't own these books, I'm not attached to them. I would be happy if I didn't have to carry any back to the car. So distribute them freely amongst each other, and I'll be happy to sign them. How many minutes do we have before we gotta get out of here, would you say? Okay, so I'll stay for another 20 minutes or so, and I will just sit right here, share hugs and books. You can come up. Oh, one other note. This is actually, these are bookmarks. Everybody can take home a bookmark. This is actually from an owl that was hit by a car. So this is a barred owl. These are barred owl feathers. So if you'd like to put one of those into your book and have a little bookmark, and one day maybe it'll just float away, and that would be fine because it'll just return to the earth. So yes, I love you all very much. I'm grateful for our time together, and thank you. And thank you to Rick for bringing me to Takoma Park.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.